My name is Min Fei. I was born in China and grew up in Hong Kong. I came to the US as a student in the early 60s. My college days took me from Midwest to West Coast. And later, after graduation, I moved my way to the East. And finally, I settled down in New York City.
Camera rolling. I'm Ping Chang, and I grew up in New York City. My education was in the visual arts originally. I studied the visual arts, and I graduated in filmmaking. And then I studied experimental theater and dance.
My name is Wang Yufeng. I was born in Taiwan. I graduated from Chinese Cultural University, where my major is Peking Opera. I came to New York to study educational theater at NYU, where I got my MA degree.
Mày xích dao, mày ngu quá. Sao quay? Thấy cái mặt đã.
My name is Charlie Chin. I was born and raised in New York City, Chinese American, and I'm working at the New York Chinatown History Project. I'm a musician and writer.
Hi, my name is Amy Chen, and I'm a Chinese American. I was born in the United States, and I live and work in New York City.
Hi, my name is Fei Chang. I'm a poet and a cultural activist. I've been working for the past 17 years in New York Chinatown developing Asian American arts programming for the community. My work is based on my background, which is growing up in Queens, where my parents ran a laundry.
I'm Chuck Ewan, and I'm a visual artist in New York. I think I'm someone who has changed since moving to New York. And okay.
My name is Daryl Chin, and I'm a writer and performance artist, and I've been working, I guess, in theater now for about 12 years, and before that I was writing and doing criticism.
I am performing artist. I give lecture, conduct workshop, and to train American actors, and also perform as a solo artist in Peking Opera. I bring these traditional performing arts to elementary and high schools, as well as colleges, museums, and libraries.
I don't work in traditional theater forms. I work in experimental theater forms, which explore how to use film, dance, and theater together in combination.
Well, I'm working on a film. It's called McCarthyism in Chinatown. It's a 1-hour documentary, and it's a portrait. It's a portrait, living portrait of Chinatown in the 1950s.
I'm a painter. This is one of my paintings. And I do a lot of ruminating. I do a lot of internal scavenging around to bring up images and try to affix them onto the canvas. So what I do really physically is sit and muse.
I'm the director of an arts organization called Asian American Arts Center at 26 Bowery in New York City. I manage the organization. The organization promotes and supports Asian American arts and the integration of Asian American arts with other arts.
With the Chinese-American experience, the history of the Chinese in America, and generally Asians in America.
In the late 1970s, we put together American Born and Foreign, an anthology of Asian American writing. My two books of poetry are in The City of Contradictions, put out in '79, and also Miwa's Song in 1982. I'm now working on a book-length manuscript.
Right now I'm working on several different projects at the same time. One thing I'm working on is a series of short stories about, I guess, my family and growing up in Chinatown. And another thing I'm working on is a very large-scale play that is sort of has over 50 characters in it, about sort of a contemporary American society.
I curate exhibitions, write catalogs, and publish them, and promote Asian American artists and their work.
I'm a sculptor. I make objects inspired by nature. They are usually bigger than life, and the way I create them usually involve a long process of modeling by hand. Later on, some of them gets to be cast in bronze.
This is Chinatown, a place in New York City where tens and thousands of Chinese live and work. most of the men work in restaurants as cooks or waiters. The women work in garment factories as seamstress or thread cutters. The laundry shops, a major Chinese livelihood, is now in decline, but it still supports many Chinese families. The Chinese work long hours, 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week. They work like this month after month and year after year. They are in America, the flower flag country, where the Golden Mountain has beckoned them across the vast oceans to pursue their dreams. In the past, they came as young men, aliens in the land of opportunity and promise. When their heads turned white, they would go back to China, like leaves returning to their roots in the fall. But the sojourners are gone. Now there's a new generation who grew up in their parents' tenement houses and half-lit back rooms of their laundries, who get tired of just washing dishes and clothes. They believe that they belong here, and this beautiful land which stretches from California to the New York Isle belongs to them too. So they seek their roots here, in America. They work hard, just like those before them, and go to school. Some become physicians, some lawyers. A few, against the best advice of their elders, pursue their dreams in a different stratosphere. They become artists, poets, and musicians. Ever aware of their uniqueness and their minority status in this country, they recognize and reaffirm that they are a part of the whole. They exult in the beauty and riches they have discovered and cry out for justice in hope of a more perfect world. Breaking new grounds, seeking nutrients from the arts and cultures of China, Asia, and America, creating through their works a new reality of the Asian American here in Chinatown.
What's interested me is the use of different medias and elements of performance and combining them and trying to find a new language that is appropriate and addresses the issues of 20th century problems, life, and so on. So it's the feeling of being a 20th century artist that is evident in the way these works look and feel. It's trying to find something that fits into the present time in America, a technological society whose value system has changed tremendously, and that's part of what an artist today has to address, is the changes in morality, in ethics, and in the way of life, and how the electronic age has changed everything. You could say that the way I work is in the form of an experiment, somewhat in the same way that a scientist might experiment. And sometimes things fail and sometimes they succeed. But it is comparable to the idea of a scientist in his laboratory exploring. This is not what in America would be considered commercial theater, in that there's always that it's subject to the marketplace. Much of the work is subsidized, my work is subsidized partially by the government. And we also, some of the work that I do is difficult to follow, difficult to understand for a general audience, but the show that I made called Kindness is one that a general audience can follow. And it is, the subject of kindness is the problem of people coming from different cultures and trying to understand each other. I think something that every nation can appreciate, this problem of communication between one nation and another, one culture with another. And kindness explores this problem. And it's shaped in the form of a comedy in which 6 friends, one it follows the lives of six friends, and one of whom is a gorilla, and one is a blind girl, and how these differences affect them.
Times that a fighter always light, but the twinkle in his eyes never failed. He puts a kettle on the table and he leans against the wall. He says, excuse my English, but his words speak for us all. He says, these hands have washed the clothes, these hands have served the food, heaven knows. Neck has felt the mouth rope and it's been behind barbed wire. This back has laid railroad track, these arms have been for hire. These hands have fought injustice and this soul has been on fire. But I'm still here and growing strong and getting tired of proving I belong. Mrs. Gomez works the night shift at the pediatric ward. By day she cooks the meals for her own. New in the big city she has never given up and fights to give her kids a decent home. It's Mrs. Kim who sells the produce on the corner of the square. People hurry by but we all know she's there. And so the story goes for another generation, another page, a chapter being turned. Tomorrow is the struggle we face with anticipation, and yesterday are lessons we have learned. Johnny is a young boy who pumps gas to pay for school. His class is getting cut back one by one. John's father marched in Europe and his mother was in camp. Each shows off the battle scars they've won. Sometimes you hear his voices that come drifting down the hall, but deep inside them both they know what binds them binds us all. Because these hands have washed the clothes, these hands have served the food, heaven knows. This neck has felt the mouth rope and it's been behind barbed wire. This back has laid railroad track, these arms have been for hire. These hands have fought injustice and this soul has been on fire. But I'm still here, growing strong and getting tired of proving I belong. I'm still here, growing strong and getting tired of proving I belong.
talk about this volume of work, I have to go back almost 13 years when I first moved to New York and finally found myself settled down and looking for things to do. And realizing that nature has become very appealing to me. And I find myself looking at fruits and vegetables, and all things natural become very exciting for me and sources of my inspiration. Slowly I start to make works based on nature as a source, and I use it as a reference from my cross-cultural background. There is this mythological fruit-vegetable garden in the celestial heaven, and I use that as a resource for my imagination, where I am really a gardener in that place. Slowly, the garden started to grow, and I was just about growing everything that I could get an example of. My source mainly were from Chinatown and whatever other New York City natural resources were. As it grew further, I realized that there are more things that I'm interested in and I couldn't find them. So I started to look around, and I found myself looking at more exotic things. And the little voice in my head is still talking to me, and the imagination drive from that celestial garden, and I feel I'm also sailing away from that at the same time. So the garden starts to become an established place where I come back to. Meanwhile, I go out and take trips and bring back exotic examples and see if they grow in my studio, which is also my garden. And as time goes on, we're talking about 10 years later, and I've been many places, and my garden become a great variety of specimens. It's like an experimental house where I grow all exotic, very special, personal, mythological things. Slowly I realized that the work is really about myself. It's my personal imagination, my own personal creation. It all comes from my inner being, in a sense, that the little voice is a cross-cultural voice. I simultaneously think in both cultural language, and the work reflects that, and I think that's where I'm going.
Parents. He came to America, aged 11, washing people's socks, slept in class, a paper son with false papers bought back in the village because America restricted aliens. I have a cameo photograph of him, New York, Chinatown, 1939, sepia-toned, up-breasted suit, out with the boys on Sunday. America only let the guys in, and hey, that dude was some snappy dresser. During the war, they let him work the Navy yards as an apprentice steel welder, but when the soldiers came home, the laundry customers called him Charlie. And she came in 50, classified refugee from China, from the feudal backwoods of Kwantung, marriage arranged, New York rush hours, speaking no English, working in sewing factories till her back gave out. They raised a family in the back room of a laundry, 10 feet by 14 feet, Queens, New York, in the 50s. There were one folding table, 6 folding chairs, 1 convertible sofa, 2 folding beds, 1 baby crib, 3 metal cabinets, 1 black and white TV, 1 sink, 1 refrigerator, 1 kitchen range with 2 burners, no heat, no hot water. To earn money, a customer brought in a dirty garment, got a ticket, came back in 3 days, and in the meantime, the garment is sorted, marked in an inventory, picked up by a commercial laundry, washed, returned the next day, resorted, starched, hung to dry, rolled to iron, ironed, packaged, shelved with the other bundles. In the 50s, one made a nickel for for each piece. He worked 6 days a week, 16 hours a day. She raised children, cooked, cleaned, sewed, worked in that laundry when there was time. He couldn't take it. He gambled with the boys. She told him quit it or she would leave. And they, in the end, though it was not this simple, put down a mortgage on a little house. And the customers called him Charlie and her Mrs. Charlie. He passed away 2 years ago from cancer, 50 years old. The relatives said he was a good man. She misses her best friend, continues the laundry, watching the children leave. She hopes they graduate from college, marry, have happy lives, grandchildren for her and him. The legacy is the clarity of our vision. What we choose to do with our lives will bear fruit to that work and spirit.
This is in this space? Asian American arts can be explained in the broadest terms. It could be Asians making art in America, or it could be Asians making Asian arts in America, or it could be Americans making Asian arts in America. It could be as broad as internationally Asian people with some kind of American influence or Asian influence. Or it could be as narrow as only Asian Americans with the concept of being Asian American politically.
American citizen, and I identify myself with Asian Americans. I have a group of artist friends who have similar background, and they're artists, and they do art, and I see those as being Asian American art.
I'm interested in the avant-garde theater. One of my favorite groups to work with is the Bread and the Puppy Theater. A goal of mine is to introduce Chinese performing concept and technique to avant-garde theater. I also incorporate both Eastern and Western style to form my own contemporary solo piece.
Done our Filipino dances and our Polynesian dances and also our modern pieces as well. So we're now going to see Nancy.
Well, as to what the question is in terms of Asian American art and culture and consciousness, there is no one answer, since there are basically two things happening, the blending of Asian and American culture. It's never exactly the same twice, and there are as many different answers as there are people to perceive it.
Being an Asian American artist is too complicated and complex an issue to talk about in such a short time.
In the late 60s and early 70s, a lot of us were student activists and anti-war activists, and also working, organizing around community issues in Chinatown. As we got more deeply involved with our work, we wanted our literature, culture, art to reflect the lives of our parents, who were garment workers, laundry workers, restaurant workers, and also the history of Asian people in America.
Nancy also teaches a modern jazz class here every Wednesday. It's a class for beginners and non-dancers. So if anybody's interested, come take classes. Okay, the second piece that we're going to do will be a demonstration of Peking opera by Kwang Yu Fong. Kwang Yu has
American art are the Asian American artists who produce and draw from many sources, both East, West, but from many other sources as well. And their work may be very interesting in terms of where their sources are from.
She will do some demonstration.
Thank you. Today I cannot wear my traditional costume with me because this is party and I want to have fun also. So this is my Chinese jacket, which is also embroidered. So I think I like to wear it tonight. The first pieces I'm going to do, don't worry, I will not do half-hour demonstration. Sometimes if I start, I cannot stop. And the first one I'm going to show you is Kunqu, which performed by a Chinese for 200 years already. And this piece is about a nun. She's very young and she wants to away from the temple. So she's
important film for me because it deals with the history of Chinese Americans that has been totally unrecorded. The information that we've been digging up from the federal records, the National Archives, and so forth, recreates for us an understanding of what Chinese had to go through throughout the centuries of being in the United States, what it was like for Chinese to be an unwelcome guest of the United States, and what happened to Chinese during the 50s, during the anti-communist hysteria, when China became a communist country and all of a sudden all Chinese were considered enemies of the United States. And this documentary deals with the men and women who stood up for China, who wanted to say something about China, and were demonstrating a national pride and demonstrating something that touched their lives very deeply and tried to express it in some way. And at the same time, this film is of our own cultural and historical legacy. It's a story of individuals, it's a story of a community in transition, and it's a story of America. It's a story of how America, China, and Chinese Americans all lived during the 1950s.
Well, I try to set up my paintings so they're not really problem solving per se, because I think that's too much of a kind of a goal-oriented activity. I prefer to think of it more in terms of maybe organic problems that occur during the course of painting. I mean, for me it breaks down into two questions: what to paint and how. And what to paint and how. I usually start out a painting with a very slim idea. It's a very small idea, and it grows as I do it. The painting may turn upside down or sideways or whatever during the course, and I try to let the painting resolve its own problems, to suggest resolutions and so on. What I'm basically looking for, on a very broad general level, is that collusion, how it comes together between the, say, more formal, two-dimensional aspects and aspects definitely dealing with content, what is beneath the surface. and how it addresses the surface. The future, that's a tough one. I think maybe the way to best approach it is to go to the past. I started out doing paintings about stereotypes. And what I was hoping to establish was a metaphor between the painting surface and the personal surface. And as I continued with those paintings, they began to unfold, obviously, tritely maybe, trying to penetrate that surface. So I think as for the future, I'd like to, I hope that the outward movement, that outward unfolding continues. And I obviously hope that maybe its ability at some sort of social or personal evocation is strengthened. Well, the name of this painting is Pick a Horizon, Any Horizon, and it's said somewhat cynically.
It's the last thing that I've written, and it's a review of a book called The Formalist Theater by Michael Kirby. In certain respects, there is a difficulty in discussing a formalist theater within the context of the American theater, because the book is in a tradition which has little to do with the theater. Not that the essays have little to do with the theater, just Kirby's theoretical framework. Many commentators have noted that much modern theory owes a debt to the vocabulary of the theater, without ever accounting for the theater within the province of cultural importance. Bonnie Morenka notes this discrepancy frequently and has tried to bridge this gap. But in the theater as practiced in the United States, there is little room for the theorist practitioner, the person whose importance comes from the possibilities proposed rather than necessarily from the work as realized. Too often, the types of books which get written from theater practitioners are more in the way of handbooks, guides to successful production, how-to manuals. A formalist theater joins a select group of American publications, which include Lionel Abel's Metatheater and the books of Joseph Chaikin and Herbert Blau. Not a collection of scripts or texts, nor a collection of reviews, but a philosophical treatise derived from the experience of working in the theater. Kirby's volume evokes such books as Nathalie Sarraut's The Age of Suspicion and Alan Robbe-Grier's For a New Novel, because he is proposing a new way to look at an art, as well as a new way to work in that art form. But the works which he himself has made may not be the fullest expression of the sensibility which he envisions. I guess one statement that I felt was very relevant a long time ago when I read it was something that I think Richard Foreman and Yvonne Rainer talked about in some interview that they did together in an art forum, which had to do with art being the creation of an ideal world of activity. And I think that when I've tried to work in the theater, I've tried to do that, to create a sort of world where there's like sort of a multicultural and multi-ethnic and multi-dimensional place where there's all these aspects. Right now I'm working on something, it's called Dispersion's Cast, and it's a text of a sort of play that I did in one version a few years ago. And it's, right now it's going to be like huge. I mean, there's 3 sections. Each section is about 3 hours in length. And it'll have over 50 characters. I mean, there are Asian Americans, and there's blacks, and there's whites, and just a lot of different types of people. And it's sort of like their lives during one particular summer, which happens to be the summer of 1984. And the issues that come up, political and social and sexual issues that people are dealing with. So I've been trying to do that in my work. At this point, I think that there's a lot of reasons to assume that, I don't know how to say this exactly, there's not a specific Asian American or Chinese American sort of identity because people are working in so many different ways. But I think that you have to sort of be aware of the fact that, you know, you have a certain heritage. And the reason you have to be aware of it is just sort of the way that our society is structured, the society in this country, the United States, which sort of does place a lot of labels on people. And I think that, you know, when I'm doing sort of my work, I try to create a situation where like these labels become irrelevant at a certain point, but nevertheless that's sort of like creating that ideal situation, which I don't think really exists at the moment. So I think that many Asian American artists find that no matter how hard they work, there's still certain areas where they find themselves categorized and sort of boxed in with a label. And I don't think this is necessarily bad. I just think this is a fact that people have to deal with.
There is such a thing as Asian American art. Not because it's an aesthetically coherent movement, not because the artists are creating great achievements at this time, but because we're here, we respond to our environment. We are Asian Americans, and there's going to be, just naturally, there's going to be something that's going to continue with us. And this whole situation between 2 cultures, between many cultures, interlinking. Just building an organization capable of doing something has taken so long. We still need to let people know that there is something out there, something that we want them to believe. We need to create and develop a way of thinking about this, something that will be accepted critically. And also there's the whole social and political situation. Just to get accepted, it's going to be, it is, a big job. And we're in a context, we're not alone. There are lots of other people here. And we need to find who they are, how we feel about them. What's exciting is that things are changing, something's happening. And we're a part of that. We're a large part of it. People today can imagine the past, they can imagine the present. And what's next? Out of all that surrounds us, we can create. As the U.S. comes to grasp itself in the context of many cultures, that's going to have a tremendous change everywhere else. People may soon be ready to understand themselves, not in material terms, but in cultural terms, in terms of art. That's what turns me on about all that's happening, about what we're doing, trying to do.